Elizabethan England was a land torn between two faiths, two loyalties, and two visions of the future. After Henry VIII severed ties with Rome and established the Church of England, the nation was plunged into decades of turmoil. Monarchs swung between Protestantism and Catholicism, and with each change, allegiance became a matter of life and death. Under Elizabeth I, Protestantism was enforced as the state religion. To be Catholic was not just frowned upon, it was treasonous. Priests were hunted, Mass was outlawed, and those who dared to defy the law risked imprisonment, torture, or the gallows. It was in this climate of fear and persecution that Margaret Clitherow lived. Born in 1556 in York, Margaret was the daughter of a prosperous tradesman and married to John Clitherow, a butcher and chamberlain of the city. Unlike her Protestant husband, Margaret embraced Catholicism passionately. Converting in her teenage years, she became a devoted member of the underground Catholic community, attending secret masses and providing shelter to hunted priests. For years, her home became a refuge, beneath the floors, within the walls, or hidden in secret chambers. Catholic priests found sanctuary in Margaret's house. To harbor them was considered treason, punishable by death. Yet Margaret's faith was stronger than her fear. She risked everything, her safety, her reputation, her life, to protect the men who kept her faith alive. To her, these priests were not fugitives but heroes of God, and she believed that aiding them was a sacred duty. Her courage did not go unnoticed. The authorities in York were well aware of her devotion, and in March 1586, they struck. A search of her home uncovered the evidence they needed: vestments, chalices, and other materials used in Catholic worship. Margaret was immediately arrested and charged with harboring priests. The trial that followed placed Margaret in an impossible position. To plead guilty would be to condemn herself outright. To plead innocent would drag her children, her husband, and her servants into court, forcing them to testify under oath. Any words they spoke could either damn her or place themselves at risk. Margaret understood this trap all too well, and so, when asked for her plea, she refused to answer. Her silence was not weakness but sacrifice, and attempt to shield those she loved from the cruel machinery of Elizabethan justice. Her refusal sealed her fate. Under English law, those who would not enter a plea could not be tried by jury. Instead, they were condemned to Peine, Forte at Dure, strong and hard punishment. It was a death as rare as it was brutal. The victim would be crushed beneath heavy weights until the body broke and life ebbed away. The law intended this as both torture and warning, a punishment so grotesque that few dared to risk it. For Margaret, it became the cost of conscience. When her sentence was read, Margaret showed no fear. Instead, she accepted it with calm resolve, declaring that she would die for the love of her Lord. Even her jailers were shaken by her composure. In a world where executions were meant to terrify, Margaret's faith radiated like a flame, steady even in the shadow of death. On the morning of March 25th, 1586, Good Friday, Margaret was led to the toll booth on House Bridge in York, where her execution would take place. The choice of day was no accident. To Catholics, Good Friday was sacred, the commemoration of Christ's crucifixion. To die on that day gave Margaret as martyrdom a symbolic weight that even her executioners could not have foreseen. The grim preparations were made. Margaret was stripped of her clothing. Dressed only in a simple shift, she was laid on her back upon the cold ground, her arms outstretched in the shape of a cross. A sharp stone was placed beneath her back, positioned to pierce her flesh as the weight pressed down. A wooden door was lowered onto her body, and the executioners began to stack heavy stones and weights upon it. Slowly, the crushing force bore down upon her chest. Every breath became a battle, every moment a torment. The sharp stone beneath her back drove deeper into her flesh, agony radiating through her body. Her ribs strained under the pressure, lungs fighting desperately for air. And yet, through it all, Margaret remained unbroken. Witnesses later testified that she prayed continuously, her lips moving in devotion as the stones pressed the life from her. Her strength was astonishing, her faith unwavering. The onlookers, who had expected screams of terror, instead saw a woman embracing death with dignity. Her composure unsettled many, for it transformed the execution from a spectacle of punishment into a testimony of faith. As the weight grew heavier, the slow suffocation took its toll. Margaret's chest collapsed inward. Her voice faltered, and at last the breath left her body. In less than 15 minutes, she was dead. The executioners, perhaps uneasy at the sight of her steadfastness, acted more swiftly than the law required. Her martyrdom, though brief in time, was eternal in impact. For the authorities, her death was meant to be a warning, a reminder that defiance against the crown and its laws would be crushed literally. For the Catholics of England, however, it was a beacon. Margaret Clitherow, the butcher's wife of York, had become a saint in spirit long before the church recognized her as one. Her body had been broken, but her faith had remained whole. When the heavy stones were finally lifted, Margaret Clitherow's body lay crushed, broken beyond recognition. The executioners may have expected her to be forgotten, buried quietly as another victim of Elizabethan law. Instead, they had created a martyr whose name would echo through centuries. The immediate aftermath was one of shock and unease, even among Protestants in York. Many were disturbed by the cruelty of her death. Executions were common enough in Elizabethan England, but pressing to death was rare and carried with it a sense of barbarity that unsettled onlookers. To kill a woman in such a brutal fashion, one who was known locally for her kindness, charity, and devotion, was viewed by many as excessive, even monstrous. Her body was quickly buried in an unmarked grave, denied the dignity of a Christian burial, yet within days, stories of her courage began to spread. Those who had witnessed her execution carried the tale far and wide. How she refused to speak in court to protect her family. How she had prayed as the weights pressed down. How she had died without fear. In an age when Catholics lived in hiding, her death became both a warning and a source of inspiration. The Catholic community in England embraced her as a hero. To them, she embodied what it meant to hold fast to the faith under persecution. Her home had been a sanctuary, her silence in court an act of selfless love, and her execution a testimony to the strength of conscience. For Catholics living in constant danger, Margaret Clitherow was proof that the faith could not be stamped out, that even in death there was victory. Her martyrdom also exposed the brutality of Elizabethan justice. Peine Forte at Dure had been used in England before, but rarely, and Margaret's case became one of the most infamous examples. The punishment was designed to force the accused into entering a plea, but Margaret's refusal was deliberate. She had chosen the crushing rather than risk her children and servants being forced to betray her. Her sacrifice highlighted the inhumanity of a system where silence was punished with torture, and where conscience was trampled beneath law. In the decades that followed, her name lived on in Catholic circles, spoken with reverence in secret gatherings and whispered prayers. She became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that ordinary believers, not just priests and nobles, could stand as pillars of faith. Unlike many martyrs who were clergy, Margaret was a laywoman, a mother of three, a butcher's wife. Her story proved that sainthood was not confined to the elite, but could be found in the streets of York, in the heart of an ordinary home. Centuries later, the Catholic Church formally recognized her sacrifice. In 1929, Margaret Clitherow was beatified, and in 1970 she was canonized by Pope Paul VI as one of the 40 martyrs of England and Wales. Her name was placed alongside bishops, priests, and others who had died under the penal laws. But her story stood out for its uniqueness. The image of a woman crushed beneath stones was unforgettable, a vivid reminder of the cost of conscience in a world where faith was a crime. Today, she is remembered not only as a martyr, but as a saint whose life speaks across time. In York, her house still stands, preserved as a shrine to her memory. Pilgrims visit the spot where she once sheltered priests, where she prayed, and where she prepared herself for death, the Ouse Bridge, where her execution took place, remains a silent witness to the cruelty of the past. The very streets of York carry her story, entwined with the city's history. Her legacy is also deeply symbolic. The crushing of her body has often been seen as a metaphor for the crushing weight of persecution that bore down upon Catholics in Elizabethan England. Yet just as Margaret's spirit could not be broken, so did the faith endured. Her death became not an end, but a beginning, a light in the darkness of oppression. For historians, Margaret Clitherow SK stands as a chilling example of how law and faith collided in Tudor England. Her martyrdom was not an accident of history, but a product of a society where allegiance to Rome was considered treason and where even a butcher's wife could become a threat to the crown. Her silence in court revealed the cruel trap of the system. There was no true justice, only a choice between self-destruct and betrayal of loved ones. For believers, however, Margaret's story transcends politics. She is remembered as a woman of unshakable conviction, who placed God, family, and conscience above her own life. Her death was gruesome, but her faith was unyielding. In her final moments, stripped of dignity by her executioners, she became more dignified than ever. The memory of Margaret Clitherow continues to resonate because it speaks to something universal: the struggle to remain true to one's beliefs in the face of overwhelming power. Her crushing execution is horrifying to imagine, but it is her courage, not her suffering, that endures. She turned pain into testimony, silence into strength, and death into victory. Margaret Clitherow was not a queen, a noblewoman, or a famous scholar. She was an ordinary woman who chose extraordinary courage. In 1586, the stones pressed the life out of her body, but they could not crush her faith. More than 4 centuries later, her story remains one of the most powerful in the long, dark history of executions. If this tale of horror and courage gripped you, then join us again here at Torture's Rooms, where we explore the darkest punishments, the bloodiest executions, and the forgotten martyrs of history. From flames to gallows, from wheels to stones, we uncover the cruelty of the past and the courage of those who endured it. Subscribe now, and never miss another story of agony, defiance, and the unbreakable human spirit. Because even when the stones fall heavy, memory rises stronger.